Okay, here's a working version of Game of Life. I can reset random, get it to play, clear it out if I want to. Actually, I'll even implement that. Probably would be a good idea to do. Anyway, I'll do that the next time around. So what I'm going to do here, I've got this running with browser sync. I'm going to actually undo all my changes. Got my game.js file. I'm going to do git.checkout dot and do this whole thing again. So right now, this to start my browser sync again, and actually copy it from what I did here. This basically is starting browser sync, telling it to start a server, and telling it to monitor game.js. So now browser sync is starting, it's connected, and the only thing that should be working is this. Okay, let's get to work. So let me undo all this. First thing I'm going to do is build my for each cell method. And I'm going to come down here. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Try to find out how much time this takes. So we're going to say this for each cell. I'm going to put a function in here which is going to return a cell. A console.login. Nice thing about this is that I'm not even going to have to refresh my screen. If I just pop back here, this is going to reload, and nothing really is going to have changed here. Let me open up my console.log. What I want to do here is I'm going to actually go up here, and just to make sure that this is working, I'm going to call my iterator function, and I will call it, and I'll say hello. I know this is being called. Now what I want to do is I would like to leap over all of my cells. So what I'm going to do here is do a loop. I less than this dot width. I plus plus. And let's just pretend that I'm going to call this iterator function with I just to see that it gets called. And there's I. Very nice. Okay. Now we're going to do a nested loop. And now we're going to be going in the vertical direction. This is going to be J. This is going to be height. And this is going to be J++. And let's just go over here and we'll say I plus a dash plus J. Okay, that looks pretty good. Those are going to be the IDs for our cells. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call my iterator function, and I'm going to say document get element by ID, and it's going to be for this cell, and I should end up seeing a bunch of cells pop up here, which I actually see. So these are all my cells. Now, one thing that I realized here is that I seem to be doing a lot of, well, let's actually wire this up and then we'll worry about it. So I'm getting my cell back and I'm going to say cell on click, and I've got this method on cell click. The context in here is going to work because this is just a cell that's being called. Once I do this, I could unwire this. When I run this, instead of seeing anything, I should be able to click on any of these and basically toggle this. Okay, very good. So one thing I realized is that I'm doing a lot of work with these cells. To me, it would be a little bit nicer if I could do something like this. When I iterate, I call a new cell. And the reason why I want to do this is that I've got all these things that a cell is doing. I don't do that. Okay, I have a problem because I don't have cell defined, but I'm going to go up here and I'm going to create a function called cell. When I call cell, I'm going to pass in an element. This is going to be my DOM element. I don't need anything over there. And again, I'm just working this a little bit at a time. When I call this, I'm going to say this dot element equals element. This is just a very simple object that's wrapping a DOM element, and this should get rid of that error, but you'll notice that this doesn't work now, and the reason why it doesn't work is that when I go over here, let me get rid of some of this stuff, a little bit easier to see this, and let me clean this out since I don't need it. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually not going in here and doing cell click, but I'm going to say cell element dot click because that's my DOM element. I've wrapped my DOM element inside of this cell object, and some of this will become clear in a little bit. Okay, now I'm back to working. So now the next thing that I'm going to do, I think one nice thing to do is to go through the process. Before I do stepping, I'm going to see that I could do reset, random, and clear. These are a lot easier to do. Clear is going to be the easiest, so let's actually do that. So when I go over here, I'm going to set up my board events. What's the name of my clear button? It's just clear underscore BTN. So clear underscore BTN. When I go to set up my board events, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say document get element by ID. This is going to be clear underscore BTN. Just to see that I can do it, I'm going to set style display equals none. And I just want to see if my button goes away. That'll at least tell me that I'm capturing the correct button. And it does. Okay? So I've got the correct button. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do an on-click event. An on-click, I'm going to say this dot clear. Notice something, I'm not calling the clear method. Okay? I'm just specifying that that's what I want to have called when this ends up getting clicked on. If I ran this and I did clear, I wouldn't end up seeing anything. Okay, so once we end up calling clear, clear button on click equals this dot clear. I think there might actually be a clear here. Let's see. I would have actually expected that to be an error. No, there's not. Well, I guess I'm setting the on-click event to undefined, which means it doesn't do anything. So here, put this function in, and just for kicks, let's just see what this points to. Clear points to the button. I don't want it to be the button. I want it to point to my game of life. If I want to do that, what I want to say is, hey, look, when this is called, okay, give me back a function where the context is going to be my board. Now when I do this, and I click on clear, I see that I've got my width and height, my step interval, and all this stuff here, and that's exactly what I want. So let me do the same thing over here. I'm not really implementing this yet, but since I can do that, let me also do, what do we have? We have our random button, and this is, random is reset BTN. I'm going to call this reset BTN, and this is going to be reset. It's really reset random. This is going to help us get a lot of the methods that we're going to use. Once I end up going in here, going to, again, let's do console.log this just to make sure I've got the right context, which I expect to. Let me actually make my life a little bit easier so that I can really just run this without having to click anything. And so just manually in here, when I get in here, I'm going to say click. So not only can I set the click event handler, but I can actually, behind the scenes, go and execute that by getting that to run by actually clicking the click event handler. So now if I do this, when this runs, I should see my object, which is exactly what I want to see. And when I end up calling reset, what I'm going to do is to say this for each cell, function cell, And what I'm going to do, since the cell is passed here, that's what I was talking about before, I'm going to tell my cell to set random. Now that method doesn't exist now. And if I run this, I'm going to get a lot of errors because cell set random is not a function. So let's go back up here, and we're going to use our object orientation. Prototype set random is equal to a function. Assigning this and put a semicolon here. And what I want to do here for now, I'm going to, I have my cell here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say states equals dead or alive. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say state equals states, and I'll say math.floor. You can break this up into smaller pieces too. Math.random, which is a number between 0 and 1, and I'm going to multiply it by 2. So I have a number between 0 and 1 that I am now multiplying by 2. That's 0 to 1.99. I do floor, I get a number between 0 and 1. That's my index. So I'm going to just say console.log state. I should see alive or dead randomly, which I do. Now what I'm going to do here, just for kicks, I'm going to say this.element inner HTML equals state. So you can see it. I should see alive or dead randomly over here. Looks pretty random to me. And what I'm going to do is now set this property. So once I end up getting over here, I'll say this.element class name is equal to state. This.element set attribute. This is going to be data status is going to be state. So I'm just going in and randomly setting these. And I've got this, which is what I want. And every time I reset random, I get a different combination. Okay, pretty happy with that. So the next thing that I want to do here is I'm going to start working on my set function. And for my set function, what I'm going to do is I want a step. So I'll go over here, and this is going to be my step button. And again, this is going to be step. And I'm going to go over here, and just for kicks, I'll say console.log this. And I'll go in here and just to make sure that this runs. I'll have reset run, and I'm also going to say, hey, step, you run too. I'm just going to end up getting called once, but I see my object pops here. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Now I'm actually going to go through this step process. In order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, so the step process is really two different things here. I really need to determine what the next state of my cell is. And the way that I'm going to do that is that for each cell, I'm going to tell the cell to pre-step. Pre-step is going to determine what the next state of the cell should be. When I do this, I get an error because pre-step doesn't exist. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to do this one step at a time. I'm going to get the nearest neighbors. I'm going to do some calculations. But again, I'm not going to write too much at the same time. Now I could go down here. I'm going to say cell.prototype pre-step. For now, I'll keep it simple. See that this is getting called for each element. I'll say this.element inner HTML equals, well, and just see that that's getting called. And what I want to do here is when we end up pre-stepping, I'm going to need to do a couple of things. First of all, let me find out what is the status with my particular element. So instead of setting this to hello, I'm going to tell my object, hey, look, get status. Okay? Again, my cell doesn't have a get status. It's going to throw an error. But let's actually go and get the status. Status is going to be based upon the class name. That's what's going to determine the status. So one thing I can do here is that I'm going to want to return dead or alive. And so I'm going to do something. We haven't really done this before, but I'm going to say cell.prototype dead equals the string dead, cell.prototype alive. So this is just one object. It's shared. I'm making it capitalized because this is just a really constant that's not going to be changed here. So now I could replace this dot dead, dot alive. I've got just sort of one magic string here, and this should work the same at this point. I'm not returning anything. I don't have a get status method. So what I'm going to return here is I'll say if return this dot element. Don't forget, I've got to go down to the element dot class name. It's equal to this dot dead. Return dead. Otherwise, I return alive. That's going to be the status. And so I should see that the blue ones are alive and the white ones are dead. That's what I'm looking for. So the next thing that I need to do is that when I pre-step, I'm going to find out how many neighbors each of these cells have. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the cell to get neighbors, and let me do this. Neighbors equals this, get neighbors. That method doesn't exist, and we'll add in a second. Okay, so get neighbors doesn't exist. So how do we find the neighbors? And this is going to be a prototype method. A few things a little bit interesting here. So for starters, I'm going to say, I'm going to call something steps. And I'm going to go from -1 to 0 to 1. And just for kicks here, I'll return steps just so I could see it here. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but get neighbors is not a function. It's not because I should say get. Okay, so we've got these strings here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the indexes, the positions for this guy. So what I'm going to do here is that when I end up going in here, I'm going to say x is going to be equal to, let's say this, we'll say parts equals this dot ID split at a dash. And I'll say x equals parts 0. I'm going to use that trick to multiply it by 1 to get the integer value. Do the same thing with y. And let's just return xy. We should see a number that seems to make a little bit of sense. So we don't have split of undefined. It's not this ID, it's element.id. That looks good. Those look like the indices of my square. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do some looping here. And I'll say for var, I equals 0, I less than steps dot length, I plus plus. We're going to do the same thing with the j. J plus plus, and points equals this array, and I'll say points dot push And what I want to do is I want to get my X value and Y value for these neighbors. So I'll say this is going to be X plus steps I. This is going to be Y plus steps J. So these are just going to be incremented. So that's going to be 2 points. Let me just return those points. It's going to look a little bit silly, but I should still see a bunch of points here. And 0, 7, 0, 8, 0, 9. Looks about right, I think. So these are all my different points that are here. And really what I want to do is I want to find the elements that are here. And so what I'm going to do when I end up wanting to get my neighbors is I'm going to ask a question. And let me actually break this up. I'm going to say element equals document an element by ID. And this is going to be, it's going to be those coordinates, which are going to be, I can break this up a little bit. We'll say underscore X equals X plus steps I, and underscore Y equals Y plus steps J. And our ID is going to equal X plus dash plus Y these are going to be, that's going to be Y, and this is going to be X. We get element by ID, it's going to be by this ID. Now when we go to get the element, let's just ask the, let's actually just say, call these neighbors. We'll say neighbors dot push element. Return neighbors. Now if we do this, we could say neighbors dot length. See how many neighbors we have. Okay, so all of them have 9 neighbors. We know that's not the case. So let's figure out what they actually should be. And we'll say, hey, look, first of all, if we have an element and this element is not the same as this dot element, right? We don't count ourselves as a neighbor. We can see that looks a little bit better, right? We have 3 on the side, these edges are 5, and the corners are 3. So now once we have that, we've got our neighbors. Let's actually say, set of neighbors, let's say living. Neighbors. And we'll call this living neighbors. It's not going to be length, it's just going to be the number of living neighbors. We go to run this, layer out, we don't have living neighbors, but again, we're just breaking this up a little bit at a time. And we could say cell.prototype.living neighbors. What we're going to do is we're going to get our neighbors. Again, it's all happening within the cell. So we get our neighbors. And the nice thing about it, and actually we didn't even do this before, which I really would like to do, let's make these neighbors cells, right? They're cells in their own right. So now we could actually look at them and find out which ones are living pretty easily. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a filter function. And we'll say filtered, we'll say living equals neighbors, and there's a filter function. I'm going to pass in a neighbor. And we care only about the living neighbors. So we'll say neighbor, which is a cell, get status. And when the get status is equal to this dot live. So that's going to be our living neighbors. And we could filter this. We want to just do this in one shot. Return this. And we can get the length of that. And that should tell us our living neighbors. So it's 0, that doesn't quite look right. So here's our neighbors filter, get status. We end up getting our status. Oh, okay. Let's actually do a oh, I'm sorry, I did something silly. So when you do filter, you have to return something. We weren't returning anything. Still doesn't look quite right. Let's do console.log neighbor get status. We do have alive and dead here. And let's just say let's see if we're doing that right. Ah, okay. So why is this alive, not defined? Ah, so this is actually something else that you run into. This is good. I'm happy this happened. So when you use the filter function, if we were to go and look at the context inside of this, and I looked at what this is, let me actually take this out. Okay, so this is another change where when you call filter, you don't have control over the context. And you can see that the basically get the window object. You have control over the context of filter. So when you end up calling your filter function, you could pass in a context. And we're going to call this. And when we call this over here, now it tells us we've got our cell. And here you can actually see that it's counting it correctly. These are the alive nearest neighbors. So now we could go in here. And let's actually, when we say pre-step, let's actually have a method called let's call it get next status. What's the next status going to be? This is going to be on the cell. So we say this, get next status. Again, it's a combination of what my status is and what my neighbors are. Doesn't exist, let's get it. So when we want to find this out, again, breaking this up into pieces, get next status. It's going to be a real simple function. So we could say if this dot get status is equal to this alive. So if you're alive, you're going to stay alive. We'll return, let's say living equals this dot living neighbors. We tested this out already. So return living is equal to 2, or living is equal to 3. And we're going to return living. Otherwise, we're going to return dead. Right, so if you're 2 or 3, otherwise, we know that we have a dead cell. In this case, we could return only if living is equal to 3, and we're going to be living. Otherwise, we're going to be dead. And let's actually, even instead of using these magic strings, let's say this dot live, this dot dead. In case we change this at some point, this dot alive, this dot dead. That's our next status. So this should tell us what our next status is. So it just makes sense. Okay. You can see this is surrounded. It's going to be dead. We could see that this is surrounded. It's going to be dead. What's a dead one that's going to come alive? It's going to be over here. You can see it's got 3 neighbors. So this looks pretty good. Now we have the ability to pre-step instead of actually getting the next status. Let's actually say, instead of setting the inner HTML, let's tell the cell this dot set next status. How do we set next status? So cell dot prototype set next status equals function. When we go to set the next status, what we're going to do is we're going to say this dot element set attribute, and this is going to be data status, and we're going to set it to this dot get next status. So this is where it's counting all the neighbors and that sort of thing. And we should be able to run this. And if we click on one of these, we should see that since this is surrounded by 3 of these, we go to inspect it, we should see that the data status is going to be alive even though it's dead currently. Okay. So once we end up what I call doing pre-stepping, now we can actually do the actual step, which is to go into the fix the class name. So we're going to do the same thing here, but this will call, if you want, you can call it post step. I'm just going to call it step. Let me actually clean this out a little bit. When I go to step, pretty simply, I'm just going to have my cell, I know how to pre-step. And this is going to be step. This is going to be this dot element dot class name equals, and we'll do this, we'll say status equals this. This will be, actually, it's even simpler than that, sorry. This dot element dot class name is equal to this dot element get attribute data status. Now we could step through here, and you can see you can play this until you get to some configuration. So when we go to step, let's actually do something a little bit differently. Stepping will be okay, but we also want to be able to play. So the play is going to be button primary. We end up calling button primary. Basically, just going to be step that we're going to call with a set interval. So this is going to be play button. I'm sorry, I know I called it button primary. It's going to be play button. And when we call play button, we're going to play. Playing is just going to be stepping at an interval. You don't need to step here. Reset button, I don't mind. We go to play, and we'll call this. Actually, we have a method here already, so let's use it. This is going to be enable autoplay. So when we go down here, start out by just making sure my set timeout could work. So I'm going to say set timeout, give it a function. I'm going to do this every half a second. I'm just going to say console.log. And you know what? I don't want to do set timeout. Let me do set interval. So set interval, just keep on calling it. And if I look over here at my console, nothing's happening here. Let's make sure I'm calling this. So I don't want to, I'm going to have reset button go, but just to see if this is working, I'm going to have play button start. I can just see that this is continually just spitting this out. Instead of doing that, what I want to do, I'm going to say, let's see console.log this. I'm going to be in the same pickle that I was in before. And this is again the window object, which I don't want. I want to be at this step here. Now, I don't know, I could probably find a way to set the context, but another way you could set the context is setting a variable called that, right? This is outside my function. And then I could say just that step. And you can see my game is running. I could set it up so that it's not automatically playing, and I could also specify that when I click on reset random, it ends up stopping. So let me take this play off here. This time when I run it, it's random. I click on play, it'll end up playing. And what I want to do here is to be able to clear this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a value for my board, and it's going to be for the interval. So I'm going to say interval ID is equal to null. I go down in here. I'm going to say this dot interval ID equals this, just so you can see it. I'll say console.log this dot interval ID. When I run this and I click on play, there's this interval ID that gets set. And I'm going to do a couple of things here. I don't want to be able to enable autoplay if it's already playing. I'm going to say if this dot interval ID return. Now if I do this to play, you're not going to see this come up. I'm only going to have that one interval ID. And then when I end up doing a reset and set random, I'm going to say if this dot interval ID, then clear interval this dot interval ID, and just so this will work, I'm going to say at that point this dot interval ID equals null. When I go to play, I can play. When I do reset random, it stops. So clear interval is not a function. Let's see what that's called. Here's a set interval, clear interval. Did I misspell it? Forgot an N. Okay. And it's nice that I have the browser sync running. Play. Reset random, stops. Should play again. Let me just do one thing. Let me also do my clear. And clear should also clear the interval too. So when I go to clear, I'll be able to basically copy this code. Maybe I could draw that out. When I clear it, instead of setting set random, I'm going to say clear. And if I go down to clear, clear will set the class name to dead. And let's also, we don't need to return anything. I'll also say this element dot set attribute. This is going to be data status. This is also going to be this dead. So we run this again. We can play it. Could clear it. Not quite clearing. Let's try that one more time. Play. Clear. So let's just find out what's going on with clear. Here's our class name, setting it to this .dead. And I have a feeling that when I called clear, actually looks right. So for each of these cells, I think what's, well, that should actually work. Let's do this. Change the order here. I don't know if that's going to matter or not. I'm going to play. Let's actually just see if clear works on its own. All right, so I obviously have a problem with clear. So this for each cell clear. So this should be a pretty easy fix. I think probably I'm just not going down to the element. Element dot class name. Not a triple equal sign because I copied that. Now if I play, I could clear. I can reset random and I could play again. Because I could step, although that doesn't make a lot of sense. Clear, play. And that's about it. Okay, hope you enjoyed that.